Hello, students. Welcome to week 3 of Graphic Design 1. This week we will be going over proximity and information. The main goal of this lecture today is to understand the goal of proximity and its importance when it comes to grouping up information and making sure that we're communicating well. We're also going to be going over a couple of other graphic design principles that really shape the core of how we group up information and make sure that things that we communicate are organized well. We talked about in our last lecture how, as graphic designers or as designers in general, there's a variety of different ways that we perform our jobs, but the main thing that we do is that we are communicators. We are taking information from one party and trying to relay that to another party. And I said in our last lecture that if you, as a designer, are creating questions or causing misinformation or miscommunication through your graphics or through the information that you're putting out, if there's confusion, then you failed at your job as a communicator and as a designer. So, what are the different ways that we can make sure that we are not failing at our job, that we're making sure that we are clearly communicating the information that we need to translate to the target audience? And one of the ways that we do that is by making sure that all of that information is grouped up properly, by making sure that there is organization and order to our information. So to begin with, we're going to be going over some of the design principles that we would see to begin with. I believe we're starting off with 3 or 4 of them with this lecture, but here are some design principles that would be um, very useful for you to understand. You're going to see it. Some of you have probably already seen this being used. You've probably used it yourself, maybe in something that you've done in practice, in creating a draft, or even creating your own designs for those of you that are designers already. Um, so the first one that we're going to talk about is negative space. The first example I wanted you guys to take a look at here is something called uh, Rubens vase. I skipped ahead here. Oh, looks like it is not there. But Rubens vase was designed by Edgar Rubin around 1915. He was a Danish psychologist, and this work went on to influence many top psychologists. So the main goal of this is to kind of create questions within your mind of as far as what do you see? And some of you have probably seen something similar to this in relation to psychology or psychiatry, where the doctor will show you some shapes or blobs. It's a butterfly, it's a dog, or it's a pool of blood, or whatever it might be. Um, there are certain shapes and there's certain symbols in order to evoke certain imagery within your mind. And he says, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? And that's pretty much the same goal here, where you look at this and what is the first thing that you think about when you see something like this. Light versus dark, it might be something ambiguous contours, two faces looking at each other. The name of it being Rubens vase comes from the shape of the vase within the white space. And this is a good example of negative space being used. But negative space relates to empty space in a design. Whenever you have some kind of a design, whenever you have some kind of a graphic or a logo, any of the empty space that is around the actual designed element is going to be your empty space or your negative space. This is also called white space. This is also the borders, margins, and the space between objects. So when you're typing up a document, we'll just say that you're typing up a report or discussion report, whatever it might be, any of that space from and we're just talking about designing or typing up, writing out a report, research report, whatever that might be. That space from where the text and the margin of your paper, where the page is supposed to end, that is white space. That is your negative space. And we see that in everything that we do. We see that in documents, not only just graphic design, but we see that in a lot of the documents that we might put together. It might not be as intentional, as far as maybe when you're writing a report, you might not think, oh, I need to make sure I have white space or I need to make sure I have this negative space around my text. You're not intentionally doing that, but it is a design principle being applied there. And why is that there, or what is the use of that? That white space there or that negative space is actually uh, pulling the eyes towards what is necessary on the page or what is the important information on the page. And when it comes to a research report or a written document, what is the information that we want to draw the eyes towards? Well, it's just the text. It's whatever is written, whatever is typed out. So that's one kind of basic example of what negative space or white space is. The Apple logo on a white background draws our eyes immediately to what is in the middle or what is in the absence of that space, what is filling up that space, and it's going to be that Apple logo. That empty or that white space does not mean undesigned. There is a level of um, thought that it is put into that empty space or that undesigned space. Though you might not have to put a sign element there or a design element there, you should think of the empty space as the design element. So think about that empty canvas, that blank backdrop as a canvas or as a design element that is put there intentionally. For most of us, that's our starting point, is that empty white space. But think of that as a design element that you would um, not introduce later on, but something that's already there for you to start with. You want to be intentional with it. Framer.com refers to white space as the concept that where no design is, it's as if the page is showing itself through. Framer also says on its own, negative space is nothing. It exists only in relation to positive space. So when it comes to designs, when it comes to documents, when it comes to logos or things like that, that white space, that negative space pulls the eyes into what is in the focal point of that design. There are other ways that negative space can be used in order to draw the eyes into something within the design, something like a logo. The Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium logo. I don't remember what year this is from, but the negative space created in the white space of where the tree is at. You can see a lion and a gorilla, so you kind of see that that white space is intentional. You can yes, you have the tree, you have all the other elements that relate to, this is a zoo, this is a zoo logo. But if you look closer, you can see other elements within that. It's kind of a they call a wink and a nod or kind of an inside joke for designers. Hidden elements that you might put in that are either a um, kind of a laugh or kind of like a hidden something like a oh, if you knew you knew, from the designer to those that to the general public. um like some artists might put their name in their painting somewhere discreet and people have to look for that, like a Where's Waldo type of a thing. But this is one example of that. FedEx is another one where in the space, in the negative space or the white space between the E and the X, that is intentional as far as design to have, because there's an arrow there. Here's an example of a awards. I believe this was the Guild of Food Writers Awards of 2019. The logo that was created for that is the ink pen. Um, what do you call this? Anyway, the tip of the ink pen and the spoon um, meshing into that white space of where there would just be it looks a lot different than this, and I should have included a kind of like what the actual ink pen looks like without the spoon in the middle. But the integration of the two of those kind of kind of create the question in your mind of, as far as what do these two symbols together mean, or what does this entire logo mean? And it alludes to writing, but also what is the writing about? And that's about food, with the spoon in the middle there. So there's a variety of different ways in which you can use negative or white space. Later on, we might talk about it in our future lectures, but there is a style of graphic design. There is a style of design and art that relies heavily on this principle, and the name of that is minimalism, or the minimalistic style. The minimalistic style relies heavily on negative and white space. Minimalism is not always going to use negative space or white space. But that's kind of the starting point for a lot of minimalism. When you have just something on a white backdrop, or you have a design with little to no additional elements, that's going to be a good example of minimalism, or with that negative space design principle being used there. The next principle that we're going to be talking about is movement, and a lot of people get confused about movement. What is it? How do you actually create movement within something that is static, is not moving? like a graphic design. The purpose of movement as a design principle is the thing that is actually moving is actually going to be your eyes. And what's happening is your eyes are the design elements on the screen, the design elements on the design that you're creating are creating are making your eyes move throughout the image in a certain direction or in a certain pattern in order to understand what is going on or what is being presented. So movement, discovering and determining the eye's path throughout a design. This can be accomplished through leading lines. This can be accomplished through a couple of patterns that we'll talk about in a second, the Z pattern and the F pattern. This is also accomplished through repetition, rhythm, and color. So here's an example of direction, but also color being used to create direction. Our eyes are analyzing this design from left to right. And why is that? Well, the colors creating those bars that go throughout the design are making us almost follow and process. It's very similar to how you would read. And we'll see that in a second here. This one is going to be using, again, lines and colors, creating those diagonals. Um, in a future lecture, we're going to talk about what a lot of the lines and what a lot of directions mean. If that's not discussed in this lecture here, there's a lot of meaning that goes into many of the lines and the directions in which we use them as far as within a design, a crisscross pattern, something that goes straight across, or something that goes up and down vertically. They all have different meanings. They all evoke different emotions. The F pattern, like we talked about earlier, the F pattern often relates to text-related pages, such as search blogs, or search pages or blogs. Users read left to right towards the top of the content first, and then they read left to right below the content. So this is also a cultural thing where in America we read from left to right, but for those of you that might be familiar with something like Japanese books or Japanese mangas, comic books, those run from right to left. You have to read them right to left because it's different as far as culturally. Then they read straight down, and we can see this is a reading pattern as far as the camera picked up how the readers were reading all of the information. You can see, especially in that middle one, an F pattern as far as they analyze all of the information on the top and they kind of made their way down, but they're always going from that left to right. This is a welcome page, a landing page for a website. And again, same thing. You're analyzing that information from left to right and making your way from top to bottom in order to kind of see what's important first and then make your way down to what is called the call to action, something on that page that spurs some kind of an action or a reaction from the viewer or from the website visitor. The next one that we're talking about is a Z pattern. The Z pattern is mainly used for more simply designed pages or sites, something that might be a little bit more minimalistic or simplistic, where simplicity is a priority and the call to action is the main takeaway. The Z pattern will emerge instead of the F pattern from Jerry Cow. This is best used for landing pages or simple web pages. A little bit of the text was missing there, I apologize. So as you can see from something like this, where it's just a simple landing page, um, where you have kind of that headline. This might also be true for some news articles that might, as soon as you open it up, it might just have the headline, a little bit of information. There's typically an ad to subscribe to the newsletter, the blog, whatever it might be. This might be true for that as well. But you have the main headline. You might have a graphic to correlate with that. And then they're going to jump right back down to the corner where you've got the corresponding information, top 5 ways to do this or whatever it might be. And or download this ebook, this is free, whatever it might be. And then you're going to get that information from them in the text boxes where you're getting their information from them, and they're prompted to some kind of reaction or call to action based off of the information given to them. The next one we'll talk about is harmony. Harmony is different objects, colors, themes, etc., that coordinate together within a particular work. This shows that while different, the pieces are related and work together, and they provide a sense of peace and satisfaction within a design. Harmony is like a state of being achieved when the elements of composition are unified with one another in some way, but these elements also complement each other's unique attributes. John Lovett on harmony. Harmony is the visually satisfying effect of combining similar or related elements. On the example on your right, the common elements would be the circles. They have a variety of different colors and placements, but all together they work together because of the color palette and because of the shapes that are used, the curves, whatever it might be. They all work together to create a very harmonized design, a little bit more abstract in its design, as far as a design for the Sydney Opera House, but they all work together. Adjacent colors, similar shapes, related textures. There's a variety of different ways that you can show harmony within a design, or something that you're creating. Harmony brings unity, but without contrast, it becomes monotonous. So you need to create some kind of a pop. You need to create some kind of contrast to the design. The contrast should be understated to keep the design in balance. So you're creating that harmony, you're creating that contrast, but it shouldn't draw the eyes away from what the main design element of the design is. It shouldn't draw away from the focal point. You want everything to point towards that. The goal of the design elements, if there's a design element on your design, its goal should be to point towards the focal point of the design, whether that be information, whether that be an abstract piece, whether that be some kind of an illustration, it should point towards that or should allude to that. Harmony in a painting or design helps bring about unity. All harmony and no contrast, however, can become monotonous, like I said a while ago. A balance must be struck between areas of harmony and areas of contrast. So there's harmony in the color palette here, those soft blues, but those bright oranges and reds. There's also harmony in some of the shapes and the textures that are used here, where everything just comes together. This is a little bit more abstract as far as it being art, but we see harmony through a lot of the repeating sorry, not triangles, rectangles. Um, the You have that harmony through a lot of the repetition in rectangles, but we also see harmony in the contrasting round forms of the pots and the flowers. There's harmony in the overall color warmth, in the temperature of the overall um, uh, in the flowers, as well as in the coolness of the shutters in the window on the left side. Um, the the way that it's organized as well draws our eyes into that window where, that left window doesn't distract us. It's kind of just like a something to kind of just bring overall balance to the design. But we see some other things like the clothesline on the left side, the bottom left side, points towards that open window. It's a if you've taken photography or media foundations, it's a leading line pointing us towards that main focal point of the art piece. And then, of course, the main design principle that we wanted to focus on today is proximity. Here's a quick example of proximity as far as illustrations. Kind of a simple way to put it, but you see the man on the left, and then you see the two women on the right. Do they look like a team? No, they don't. Um, as far as the illustration is concerned, obviously something is missing in the middle. But if we were to, organize this a little bit differently, we would see those two, as far as the man and the two women, they look like two separate people. But when we fill in that gap, or when we make sure that there's close proximity throughout the whole group, and stacking them the way that they're arranged there, it looks like a corporate image. It looks like everybody is all a part of the business. They're all together. They're all one team. And that is proximity. The definition of proximity is the principle of proximity states that items close together are likely to be perceived as part of the same group, sharing similar functionality or traits. So basically, items that are together are going to be of the same group. Where we place something, especially when it comes to design, tells a lot about our relationship. Think about going somewhere with friends and family. If you are, let's say, an amusement park, when you're at an amusement park with your family, you are going to stay close to them. You're going to try to keep an eye on them. Why? Because you're a part of their group. You're not going to join some other group of people, some other family. You're not going to join them and start following them around. Why not? Well, you're not a part of their group. Some of you've probably seen some people who might go to an amusement park, they might wear similar colored shirts, something bright. Let's all wear light blue or let's all wear neon green for whatever reason. And they go to the amusement park, and why do they do that? Why do they have um I'll use my last name, Morton Family Outing, or the Mortons go to Six Flags, Knott's Berry Farm, wherever it is that you go. Why do they put that shirt on? Well, they're one group. They want people to understand that we are one group. There's also safety in it, as far as, if somebody gets lost. People might be like, "Oh, hey, I saw your group. They had the same shirt, they had the same, graphic on the back, whatever it might be, they went that direction." There are certain levels to that. Um, but the main reason that you're going to do something like that is because of unity, proximity. You guys are together. You guys are, harmonious in nature as far as you have the same things on. You're a group, and everybody's going to understand that. Same thing with objects in design. Why are these things next to each other? Why are these things close to each other? Are they related to each other? Design elements that are near each other are going to be perceived as related, while elements spaced apart are going to be perceived as belonging to separate groups. Items that are apart are going to be separate groups. People are naturally going to be looking for connections between objects or design elements. And our job as designers, again, we're communicating, but we want to make it as easy as possible for people that are viewing or digesting our designs to just understand it. When it comes to something like a business card, which we're going to take a look at in a second, how can I scan this information? How can I scan this graphic and easily just, I understand exactly what it is that you're trying to deliver to me. What is it that you're trying to make me understand? Proximity suggests relationship, and proximity is strongly tied to the separate concept of unity. And you've probably heard me say a couple times throughout this entire lecture, unity, unity, unity. What is the importance of that? Well, there's a variety of ways that we can show unity. Proximity is one of those. So a business card, like I was talking about earlier, the one on the left, great business card. It's something that we might see pretty often. The only thing that I would say about that is the organization of information, the flow of it is kind of all over the place. If you've been paying attention, what is the thing that we've been talking about as far as processing information that would relate to something like this? And that's going to be your movement or your reading patterns. Um, when it comes to typing up a document, you guys are probably familiar with left aligned, center aligned, or sorry, justified, right aligned, or centered. That's something that can be used here. We can either align this to the left or we can align this to the right. This designer decided to go with the right side, which works. Um, Personally, I think a lot of people are going to be right-handed, and they're going to, a business card is not very big. So in the space where you're probably holding that with your right hand, as far as, where your thumb might be, you're covering up the phone number and the website there. So that might be something that you might think about. Again, not a huge thing. Joe's Graphics, it's big, it's bold, it's at the top as far as our, we're going to talk about this later, hierarchy. That's another thing that's important when it comes to organizing information. Joe's Graphics, that's at the top, that's the name of the company, the business, whatever it is. There's the address, as far as that might be relevant. You've got the phone number and the website. The back, especially for business cards, nowadays it might have a QR code or something like a social media or something else related to that. Proximity establishes unity in design. Example on the left, organized. Everything's together. We understand that is those circles are together. The one on the right, everything's pretty sporadic and kind of all over the place. There's a variety of different ways as far as spacing as well, where the left side and the middle side are pretty similar as far as that's an entire, we'll call it a block of circles. Whereas the one on the right might be a little bit more ambiguous. Are these two sets of six circles, or are they all together? Question is up to you as far as what you're trying to do with that. For me, it reminds me of Domino's, not the pizza, but the actual physical Domino's. Design benefits of proximity. What are some of the benefits of using proximity within our designs? Proximity creates order and hierarchy. Hierarchy is important. We want order within our designs. We want organization. Proximity also minimizes clutter. We don't want clutter within our designs. If there's something within your design and you're looking and you're like, I don't really need that there, or it's kind of distracting, that's probably a good prompt for you to get rid of it. Proximity allows information to be found faster through spatial association. When I see a flyer on a wall, I'll use the example of we have a lot of flyers when it comes to being on campus at the college. There's a lot of flyers for events or different things going on, organizations. When I see a flyer, especially as a student, and it's something that I'm interested in, what is the first thing that I'm looking for? I already know the name of the event. It's something that I'm interested in. What is the first thing I'm looking for? Date, time. Obviously, it's on campus, so location, I'll figure it out. It's going to be on the graphic, but I'm looking for the date and the time because I need to figure out if that works in our schedule or in my schedule. If those things on the flyer, if those things on the graphic are ambiguous and they're not there, they're not in a place of prominence, or I'm not able to scan it as easily, that it hasn't achieved its job. The designer has failed their job in making the information easily communicated. We want to make sure that people can scan our graphics, can scan what it is that we're trying to deliver to them, and easily understand what it is. Um, yeah, there's probably a lot of work that goes into the illustrations and the designs and the picture and the fancy things that are put into a flyer. But if those things detract or take away from the whatever needs to be communicated, then it's a distraction. Don't get me wrong, it is great. There is space um, for all of the fancy abstract things that we put on flyers or designs, the illustrations, the pictures, they are needed. Why? Because they relate to the information, they point our eyes towards the event or the information. But if those things are taking away, again, they are distracting, then they're unnecessary, they're clutter. In our next lecture, maybe we'll look at some examples of what that might look like where uh, things are done too much. Practical usage of proximity, use barriers like horizontal and vertical rules, spacing, maybe even lines. I used boxes around my for this lecture, for these slides, I used boxes around the text information to kind of allude to that, where everything within that box is going to be the lecture notes. Use a grid system. Grid systems are great. When you get further into graphic design, a program that you might use is InDesign. InDesign is great for when it comes to creating magazines, uh, printed information, even slides, because that's what it's used for. It's created for a lot of your textual information, and making sure that there's organization within that. A lot of um, publication companies will use that in order to create their documents. But use a grid system for layout to create unity and constantly apply proximity. Group elements by relationship. If these items are related to each other, keep them together. What are some examples of that? I've got an example of the Baptist Voice. I believe this is put out by Striving. Um, let's see here. Got a couple of examples of the Baptist Voice. These were a couple of examples or a couple of the covers that were drafted for and I can't see the year on here. But the Baptist Voice. But you can see that proximity and hierarchy is used in this, and we'll talk about hierarchy in our next lecture. But at the top, you can see a lot of the main topics that are going to be talked about within this edition. Baptist Voice, big, bold, it's at the top, prominent. That's the first thing that we're going to see. Underneath that, we might see some subtext or caption that's going to relate to some things relevant to this edition, maybe um, like a website for this one in particular, from Lancaster Baptist Church and West Coast Baptist College, baptistvoice.com underneath that as well. The next thing that it's in prominence is going to be the title, the headline of this edition. Let your light so shine, and then you've got the caption of the verse. Um, Changing the world with an unchanging mission, and we see a couple of examples of this. Um, we see some examples of what we talked about throughout this lecture as well, as far as harmony, color, and as well as movement throughout the design in order to draw your eyes or to help you process. That's another thing I wanted to talk about is as designers, we're helping to make I talked about how we want to make the information clear and easy to understand, but we're also easing the call it an easy read is what we typically call it. We want to make it an easy read as far as the information, make it really easy for people to process. And then the cover that they eventually went with was actually this one here, using the lighthouse being that kind of guide, rather than lights in a room or lights in a closet. I think the lighthouse is a good illustration of that. That lighthouse warning those ships, warning those captains out at sea that, hey, there's danger here, or here's shore, because I don't know if you've ever been on a boat late at night, but it's dark. Sometimes there's not really really there's no lights around you other than other ships, the sky, the moon. Sometimes the moon's not as bright. Um, so it can be dark, and something like a lighthouse is going to be your guide through the darkness, is going to be that warning as well that, hey, you know, you're pretty close to the shore. But again, this is a good example of many of the principles that we talked about today. Movement, proximity, what are the things that what are the pieces of information within a design that are grouped together because they relate to each other or because they should be together. And we can see a pretty clear example of this where you've got um, different sections, or we'll call them blocks, of this design of this cover that are almost separate parts of a whole, as far as here's the main topics, here's our title, here's the name of our magazine, as well as all of the relevant information relating to that, and then here's the title, and here's the title um of this edition, as specifically what is kind of going to be the focus of this magazine publication. That is the end of this lecture. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me um, rather than waiting for it. But that is going to be the end of this lecture. I'll see you guys in the next one.